In the past, we've talked a lot about merchandise mysteries that have since been solved. However, there are many that remain open-ended and never quite concluded in the way I hoped. This includes the likes of the Toy Network seasonal Sonic plushes, and never coming to the conclusion on just how many different variations of the plushes exist, or if all of these variations were even officially licensed. And then there's the Kelly Toy stuff, such as the Werehog and She's the Chow. We have no idea how deep their plans for Sonic stuff actually went, as these two were never even shown in catalogs. But then if we stretch even further back in time, we get into the more esoteric mysteries that are even less documented and mysterious. The kind of stuff that I find myself gravitating more towards nowadays, just because of how interesting the product lines actually are. This includes figures like those Epoch Dead or Alive dolls, which I was convinced didn't actually come out, until sold listings were found proving they were produced. And then we reach the topic of today's video, which is one that we've touched upon before, but now we're going further down the rabbit hole, hitting both lost merchandise as well as actual lost media, because for the life of me, I could not find an image that was once online over 20 years ago, and the hunt to try to find it led me to even more discoveries and rare production information that I'm sure most people nowadays didn't even know existed. To set the stage, the topic we're going to be looking at comes to us from Dream Corp, and that's a name you might remember from some of my older videos. To those of you who recall the name, it was probably from the video I made searching for a Terry Bogard doll that, once again, I really thought did not release because this guy was so rare. Specifically, he was part of a larger Capcom vs. SNK 2 line, and this is where the mystery originally began all those years ago. Basically, in the early and mid-2000s, Dream Corp acquired the license to produce action figures and dolls from this game, and released quite a lot of products. Most commonly seen is their 6-inch action figure line, which includes a wide variety of popular characters and are all fairly easy to come across online. But to accompany these was a 12-inch doll line, which saw far fewer characters released for it, and in far fewer quantities. Ryu, Ken, Iori, and Terry were the 4 that came out, the latter 2 being extremely hard to come across, though Ryu and Ken are not exactly common either. Based on my initial research, Dream Corp was a Japanese toy company, but distributed their products all around the world. It seems like their largest distribution area was Europe, as products appear to be more abundant there, which is probably why I found my Terry from an Italian comic book website. Meanwhile, the US primarily saw the 6-inch figures, so I'm guessing few stores were interested in the dolls. Anyway, the mystery on if the doll came out or not was eventually solved, as it did. And with all the products from this line seeming to be accounted for, I figured they were just one of those companies that came and went with a niche license and that was it. But that was only the beginning of the story. Our new mystery begins on a couple of old articles that were published across 2 different toy websites, Raving Toy Maniac and Toy News International. It seems like these 2 sites were the only sites on the entire internet, or at least they are in modern times, that were receiving constant and consistent updates on the development of the Capcom vs. SNK 2 line. According to the old articles, Dream Corp's press guy would send out development photos, prototype images, and announcements that kept fans up to date with what was coming out. What's more is that at one point, you could have even contacted Dream directly through this email that enabled you to ask them questions and even submit orders for upcoming products. But we'll come back to that later. So back when I was doing my initial research on the Terry doll, I came across some of these articles and found a few items that never actually came out. I think I did mention these in my old videos too, but for a refresher, the first are a pair of characters that were going to be released in the 12-inch doll line, along with the other 4. These include Kyo and Akuma, but from the photos we can see these are very early in production. They're just unpainted head sculpts that have no other components to them. And like I said before, unfortunately these characters were never released in the 12-inch line. As far as I know, there was never any other progress updates posted about these two online, and I believe they were only ever reported on here. No matter the case, that's not all, because on Toy News International, again the only site I'm aware of that posted this in particular, they showed a fully sculpted 6-inch Terry that would have gone to the standard action figure line. He too never released, and only exists in photos. So you might be thinking to yourself at this point, okay, so we found a few cancelled products from Dream Corp, but that's to be expected, as most companies have product ideas that never see fruition. But oh no, it goes deeper than that. Because as I recently took another look through the archives of these two websites, just for fun, believing maybe there were some other cool posts detailing figures I just never came across, I hit a bit of a gold mine when it came to products we never got. In August 2005, Toy News International wrote an article that detailed more 6-inch figures that continued the selection we already had. Scrolling past rare prototype photos of Haomaru, Dream created set lists for Wave 4 and 5 based on fan feedback. These include the likes of Rock, Morrigan, and Geese, and compared to the first couple waves that were released, these characters are a lot less mainstream, which is awesome. But it doesn't even end there. As I was digging through more of their articles, I found what I consider to be the holy grail of Dream Corp merchandise. In May 2004, so a year before their 6-inch figure announcements, I found an article which was titled 12-inch Capcom vs SNK Action Dolls. And at first glance, you'd think they were just talking about the ones that were already released, or maybe the Kyo and Akuma that were shown on the other site. It was probably for the vagueness of the title that I had completely overlooked it originally. I clicked it to see what it happened to say, and to my surprise, these revealed two new, nearly complete 12-inch dolls that never came out and I never knew existed. It reads, "Here is a look at Dream Corporation's upcoming 12-inch Capcom vs SNK 2 Chun-Li and Cammy action dolls. Some decoration will be added to Cammy's tights, and the front of Chun-Li's hair is styled in reverse, but they are very close to that of the final versions now. Yes, Dream Corp had plans to make Chun-Li and Cammy action dolls, but they were both cancelled and never came out. That is both hype and disappointing. But what's also hype is that these were way farther along than Kyo and Akuma that we know of. So that would mean the photos in this article depict items we almost could have had. Except this is where the lost media comes in, as the article does not show any of the 3 photos of these figures that it once did. So to recap, we have 2 completely lost, nearly final, unreleased action dolls, 2 early production unreleased action dolls, a 6-inch Terry figure that never came out, and 2 entire waves of cancelled characters. That's a lot more than I ever thought Dream was planning in the first place. And the question is raised about if more photos of any of these exist, if they can even be found, and if we can get any answers as to why so much product didn't see production. Well, we'll see how many of those questions we can answer along the way as the search begins. And it starts right on Toy News International's website, because before we set off on a gigantic search for the Chun-Li and Cammy photo, I thought maybe it would be as simple as emailing the author of the article and asking if they simply had the photos saved somewhere, as Toy News is still very much active and up to date. A quick email later, and I got a response, stating that no, the pictures are nowhere to be found. It was explained to me that whatever server the photos were hosted on is gone. No backups exist, so they are completely inaccessible. And since I could not find any other website even mentioning the existence of these, I figured we'd need to go to the Wayback Machine and look through old captures of this site. Maybe we'd even find some other undocumented photos, or information that had been deleted over the years. So let's drop the link to the site in the Wayback Machine and see what it gives us. And oh boy, did it give us a lot. Sometimes with sites like this, especially those that cover merchandise and toys, the amount of content saved can be a little spotty, and I wasn't really expecting to find much. But Toy News International was backed up very well, and almost everywhere I wanted to go was accessible. They had great directories that could take you to specific sections, everything loaded into the webpage correctly, and just seeing all this old news content was awesome. So with everything working, I was able to find the video game toys section, and to my surprise, there was actually a whole dedicated news section to Dream Corp. After clicking that was where the fun started, because we were able to scroll through a whole bunch of articles and click them open, revealing photos that were no longer available on the current website. I was kind of surprised that so many of these images were loaded at all, and I actually think some of them weren't even on the current site at all, which is what I was hoping for, because that means maybe the dolls are here after all. So then after navigating through their archives, I was able to find the exact article from May 2004 that showed the Cammy and Chun-Li dolls. I clicked it open, hoping the photos would be there, and none of the images loaded either. I went through all the dates that had this article saved, but they all gave me the same blank result. So with these images not even being here at all, combined with the fact that large sizes would not even load for the photos that we could see, I think it was time to move on and try to search elsewhere. So now that the website that actually hosted those doll photos was off the table, I started thinking about where else would have had these, and then it hit me. Dream Corp made the products. I wonder if they had shown them off on their website at one point. Now, if you search for Dream Corp on Google right now, you will find a website that shows up, and this is the same company. However, their current site does not make any mention or reference to their older products. So we'd have to put this into the Wayback Machine and see if older versions of the site reveal anything new. Except there was one problem, because the Wayback Machine only had captures available as old as 2007. We would need to go at least as far back as 2004 to have any chance at finding Chun-Li and Cammy, so this was way off. But then it occurred to me that maybe when they changed their business name, the URL of their site changed too. There must have been an earlier site they had used to show their products. I was prepared to go on eBay and look at the packaging for their old figures in an attempt to find a website listed on it, but I didn't even need to do that. Instead, I went back to Toy News International for clues. And remember earlier when I mentioned there were ways you could contact the company back in the day? Well, a direct link was provided in one of the articles that gave me the URL of their old site. This is what I was looking for. So after putting that into the Wayback Machine, now we were getting somewhere. I was able to go back to 2004, no problem, but the earliest captures are dated 2003, which matches up with when they acquired the license. And based on the visuals displayed on their site at this time, that is even more apparent. If you click the product section, there is nothing here that depicts physical prototypes or outlined plans, and instead, it's just a bunch of official character artwork from the game under the header Action Doll and Action Figure Collection. Now, if you scroll through these, you can easily spot characters who did get both figures and dolls. Some just figures and some nothing at all. They couldn't have known exactly what they were going to make, so I believe this page is more of just a concept for potential character choices. Still, it's interesting to see pics like Morrigan and Sakura, who as early as 2003 never got selected for those earlier waves. If you continue down the captures in 2004, they replaced the character art with a page that says pre-orders for the 6-inch figures will be coming soon. And then in late 2004, they did post product images which we can't see for Ryu and Ken, along with a mention of Mai, Chun-Li, Kyo, and Iori, which I assume were the final versions since they state you can go to the shop and pre-order them. And actually, that's it. That's all Dream's website ever had for this line. Nothing about the dolls at all, or any of the cancelled figures, which felt strange to me, because how the heck could they have sent out so many photos and literally updates on the figures to those toy websites, but didn't even care enough to post all their released products on their own site? I was not satisfied with this conclusion, and started clicking around to any other link I came across, thinking maybe it would bring me to some kind of other section that was not saved properly here. I must have been missing something. And turns out I was, kinda. After revisiting their web store page, I noticed there was a link for wholesale requests, like if you were a retail store and wanted a bulk order, rather than just a regular person buying a couple figures from here. And after clicking this, it strangely brought me to a web page that had the exact same URL as the other site, except instead of it being a news section, it was instead labeled as home. I guess this was like a secret website that I didn't even know existed until stumbling upon it. Thankfully, they did have a Capcom vs SNK 2 listing that was not hard to find, so I clicked it and pooped my pants. Because while the majority of this page, as well as this site itself, does not really load, on the left side of the screen was a boxed 6-inch Ken figure, along with 16 other character names for what I can only assume were 6-inch figures that were being planned. The first portion of this list does contain names of characters we did get, but after that, it just gets wild. This capture is from 2005 and contains some characters seen in the original 2003 page. They're still here 2 years later. But then there are others that came out of nowhere, like Guile and Evil Ryu. Where the hell did all these come from? Isn't this supposed to be a Wholesale website? Why are all these unannounced, unreleased figures here? If I had to make a guess to make some sense from it, maybe this grouping was planned by Dream itself before they asked the fans and then revised it. Because right around this time, we did see a black outfit Ken from Toy News, which I don't believe ever came out. Perhaps you could say that by including the fans and changing character choices, Dream was just doing all they could to popularize the line, to keep it going and give fans what they really wanted to see from it. Because, despite the confusion that this line has brought on, all of the changing plans and cancelled figures, everything starts to make a little more sense when you go to the least likely of all places for information to be hiding, the Dream Corp forums. Yes, to my complete surprise, and I'm sure to anyone who is as invested in this mystery as me, Dream Corp actually had their own forums, where collectors could discuss upcoming figures and apparently post wish lists and trade with fellow collectors. At least that was the idea. There were barely any users registered to the site, and not much discussion at all. There was one Dream representative that went around answering questions, which is what we want to be looking at in this case. Out of everyone that ever commented on the forum, I was hoping, by some unexplained phenomena, that someone, one guy, a single person had asked them directly, when all this was going down, what the heck happened to this line? And unbelievably, there was someone who asked that. This was very late into the line, from December 2007, and this user was basically asking if anything else was coming out. They were especially looking forward to Terry, which we have seen, and Geese. But strangely, they also make mention of re-releases of Wave 1 figures in blister packaging, rather than the box style. But that there was a deadline for stores to place orders, and that had passed. I guess stores didn't order the figures, resulting in the company just giving up or something. And the response from Dream Corp to this question was fairly straightforward and not promising in the least. Their representative was French, so the English was a little broken, but in summary, they stated that the line would likely not be continuing for a variety of different reasons. Their biggest point is that while fans want to buy video game figures, and toy companies want to make them, the video game companies themselves do not understand the toy market. What fans or the manufacturer might consider a big success, that might not exactly be profitable enough for the video game companies. They say that these companies will often have profit margins that are so high, it's not feasible for the toy companies to even attempt certain ideas. In addition to the point that video game figures, especially in the case of the ones Dream Corp was working with, had a short shelf life, which basically means that when the game they're based on becomes less popular or outdated, the toy lines dry up too. Capcom vs SNK 2 would have been around 6 years old at that point, at a time when fighting games like this, and even collecting as a whole, were not in the mainstream like they are now. Finally, they conclude by stating that despite all the interference, they are still planning to release the 6-inch Terry figure in 2008, and have a couple of Capcom characters ready, but cannot move them forward until Capcom's licensing managers change, noting that to Capcom, business is one thing, but there comes a point where greed takes over. and it sounds like Capcom did not really want to deal with these toys anymore. So wow, when it comes to what happened to the line as a whole and why everything was cancelled, it seems like it was a combination of retail stores not being interested in the figures, combined with license holders being very difficult to work with. Dream Corp just couldn't survive the business of it all and dropped the line. And I would have said with the exception of Terry and the Capcom characters they mention, but as we know, none of that happened, so they really did just stop without releasing those. And if you look at the dates for all of this, it's no wonder they didn't go through with any more product releases. This post was from December 2007, while that prototype Terry was first seen in December 2005, and that list was from August 2005. That's a 2-year gap in between any product releases. But I think that covers every known prototype or mentioned character from this entire line. But where does that leave us for actually getting a photo of the dolls we set out to find, or any of these unseen figured? Well, it pretty much leaves us nowhere. Toy News International does not have the Chun-Li and Cammy photos, Dream Corp's old website has nothing, and there is no other place online that I could find that even mentions these dolls or any of the other figures. In terms of reliable places for where they could be though, I wouldn't say we're at a complete loss, at least for the action dolls. The first of these spots is a hint that was left on Dream Corp's old website in a 2003 capture that advertised an album from the Japan Expo. I looked into this, and apparently, Japan Expo was a big Japanese convention in France that covered all kinds of cultural features. And considering this is right on their homepage, I'm guessing Dream would have had a booth there showing off products. While this is earlier than the 2004 date showing the Chun-Li and Cammy dolls from Toy News International, and pretty early on in the timeline to begin with, it is possible that some early figures or prototypes were shown. I did try looking for an album of this, since the link doesn't work on their site, but I couldn't find any comprehensive guide for photos that showed vendors. I am doubtful that this would provide anything useful, but I'm sure no one has looked at this convention in over 20 years, so who knows. The second place that I'm thinking might contain the photo we're looking for, or possibly even more photos of the other prototypes, would be toy magazines. Over the years, we've made a lot of pretty cool discoveries from these old print magazines that no one comes across simply because they haven't been archived well. It's possible, given the brief fame the company had during this time, that they showed off some products in this way. Early to mid 2004 is probably the best bet for where any content would be hiding. And then finally is perhaps the most obvious solution, which would be just to contact HL Pro through their website and ask for a photo. I actually did that before I started working on this video, however I have not heard back. And since they are a Japanese company with roots in France of all places, I have no idea if they'll even understand what I'm actually looking for. This also does not take into account whether or not they have records that go back that far, or if anyone still at the company is even familiar with their much older product lines. And finally, that brings us to the last question of the video, which is, where even are all these prototypes nowadays? Not just the dolls, but the painted samples, test shots, and unreleased characters. Does Dream Corp still have these at the company? Or were they sent back to the license holders at some point? Maybe they were destroyed, or simply lost over the years. Maybe we'll never know where the physical items ended up, and maybe we'll never even get the Chun-Li and Cammy doll photos. But if anything, the potential that Dream Corp left behind in all their cancelled products is certainly enough to keep us wondering what if, even if their mysteries are never solved.